Hey guys, Realtor Adele, your favorite realtor and investment property strategist. Welcome to the monthly housing market report where we review things like home prices, housing affordability, and mortgage interest rates. We also take a look at what's going on with the Atlanta housing market. This spring, the selling season is alive and well, with housing inventory up almost 5% month over month. Buyer demand also continues to outpace housing supply. As for mortgage interest rates, they seem to be decreasing at a slower pace than expected. Over the next few minutes, we'll review all of this and much more. Here's a depiction of mortgage interest rates for the past few months. Notice that back in October, rates climbed from 7.6 to over 8%. We had a bit of a dip, then it spiked again in November, and then went on a slow downward fall. By the time we wrapped up 2023, rates had dropped to 6.6%, only to rise again as we entered 2024. Since then, we continue to see mortgage interest rates fluctuate, which of course isn't anything new. This isn't anything new. However, it was hoped that by now rates would have taken on more of a balancing trend and not so much of the volatility that we've experienced in recent times. Mortgage interest rates are interesting and can take on a tone of its own, which makes it a challenge to predict or determine where the chips may fall. Whether rates rise or fall depends on a number of factors. I've mentioned this in past videos. However, it's worth mentioning again since financing plays such a major role in the home buying process. In fact, it's the most important thing to figure out. That said, here's a reminder of how mortgage rates are determined. So we have a number of things. We have inflation, the job market, the economy, geopolitical activity, and let's not forget the supply-demand factor. In terms of inflation, the Fed's fund rate, well, first of all, the Feds don't set mortgage interest rates. However, their response to what's going on in the economy influence whether rates will trend up or down. And keep in mind that the higher the economic risk, the higher interest rates tend to be. Again, I just mentioned all of those factors that come into play in determining mortgage interest rates, or what are the deciding factors of what the mortgage rates end up being. So long story short, the higher the risk, the higher mortgage rates tend to be. Inflation tend to result in long-term rate hikes in order to slow down inflation. So over time, inflation is raised. In order to slow or tame affordability. Out of all of those factors I mentioned, whether the economy, job market, labor market, geopolitical activity, inflation will always take precedence, of course, along with the supply-demand imbalance. And this month, we've seen rates fluctuate or toggled around 7% and higher. Again, it isn't anything new or anything we knew that we haven't experienced in recent years. It's just thought by now that rates would have balanced out. At this point, you may want to ask yourself, how can I afford a home instead of waiting for rates to drop drastically? Because the data is showing us that rates will not drop drastically to what we've seen in pre-pandemic pre-pandemic years. Rates will never go back to what they were for all intent and purposes. And again, due to the data that has been released and things we've been experiencing, I think that I feel pretty confident in saying that we will never see those days where mortgage interest rates were 3%, 3.5%, or anything lower. So at this point, if you're hoping to purchase a home, a good question is probably, how can I afford to make a purchase even though we are in high interest rate environment? And there are a number of solutions actually in which that can be done, and we will explore those on the following slide. If home ownership is a goal, I think at this point the question, or you may want to consider asking yourself, how can you afford to purchase a home, as opposed to or versus sitting on the sidelines and waiting for mortgage interest rates to drop drastically. That, in my opinion, is not going to happen. And if you pay attention to what's going on in the economy and just overall with inflation, in my humble opinion, we will never see rates go back to 3%, 4%. We'll be lucky if they land in the high fives or mid fives. And of course, I am not a financial expert. This is my humble opinion based on data and just based on what's going on in the economy and with inflation overall. I've said this before and I'm gonna mention it again. You can tell that. So when you see that the cost of everything has increased, not just one thing or one or two things here or there. Inflation has affected basically every facet of life. That tells me that these prices are here to stay. And so this is our new normal. The cost of goods have increased. The cost of services has increased. And as I mentioned, inflation has affected just about everything. And so to me, that means that this is just the new normal and we're going to have to navigate life and figure it out instead of just waiting for things to change and go back to what they were. So in regard to housing affordability, depends on a combination of home prices, mortgage rates, and of course a person's income. For the most part, rates have more of an impact when determining affordability over the price of a home. I say that because out of all of the components that make up a mortgage payment, the interest rate is usually the highest part of the loan, especially in the beginning. And the amount of interest that you pay is determined by the amount of the principal. So whatever that loan amount is determines the amount of interest you pay. As you pay down that principal or loan amount, then the interest is less. So it has a domino effect. Now, the typical breakdown of a mortgage includes the principal, which is the loan amount, the interest, which is the cost to borrow that money, taxes, and insurance. In a high interest rate environment, there are several solutions that can help with housing affordability. These include buying down the interest rate, which has become more popular over the past 1 to 2 years. And you can have the seller do this. Usually the seller does this, at least in recent times, as an incentive to the home buyer. And we're finding this especially with home builders and new construction homes. However, if you are a current home owner who is selling your home, so even with resale, so regular sellers can incorporate this strategy as well. So buying down the interest rate, you can also incorporate down payment assistance, and there are a variety of those. I will include a link somewhere below this video or within the description to various down payment programs. And what else we have? Another way to afford a home in a high, or to make home ownership more affordable in a high interest rate environment. There are loan programs such as USDA. However, so USDA has 100% financing. However, you must be open to moving outside of the city center. So usually this type of funding is for rural areas or neighborhoods that are not as dense. So USDA loans, of course the VA, but that's if you qualify. So if you are a veteran or qualifying veteran or spouse, of course the VA provides 100% financing. There has also been recently 100% or zero down payment for conventional loans. Another thing you can do is pool your resources, right? So you can pool your resources, meaning purchase a home with maybe a family member. Case in point, in my personal situation, recently my mom and I have been looking at homes because pooling our resources and living together has been a consideration. So even for myself, this is something that I am actively trying to figure out. Like, what is the best way for me to afford the type of home that I want, right? In this current high interest rate environment. And pooling my resources with my mom has been a consideration. I am actually working on editing the video because I did record us touring homes together and talking about what is important for both of us, and also challenges, right? That comes with all of that. But that's another video for another day. But pooling your resources, so multi-generational living is something that you may want to consider in order to make home ownership affordable. And what else? We spoke about moving further. Oh, so even if that doesn't work for you, there's also, if you don't, if the idea of multi-generational living doesn't appeal to you, then another thing you can do is be open to location. So I mentioned moving further away from the city. So if you want to live, I can't say in the suburbs, because to me, I currently live in the suburbs, but this is one of the things I love about Metro Atlanta. I live in the suburbs, but I really like, my neighborhood is self-contained. So even living in the suburbs is not, like, it's not, what do I want to say? It's not a bad idea. It's not something where I feel that is something you may never consider, just because a lot of these neighborhoods are self-contained and you have amenities at your fingertips. where that comes into play is if you commute into your job, etc., then of course that can be a challenge depending on where your job is located. So, or move in the suburbs. For me personally, I I don't see myself living in the country. I don't see it. Um, as a single person, I don't see myself living in the country. Of course, if I have a family, if I have my family around me or my tribe, right, then that's not such a far-fetched thing. So for some, living in the country may be something appealing. Yeah, so that's another way that, or that's another way you can, that's another option to purchasing an affordable home, is not just moving to the suburbs, but beyond the suburbs, because the further away you move, the more bang for your buck. Usually you get one of two things. If you get both, then that's even better. But usually you get a larger footprint in terms of square footage of the house, or more land. So that's a consideration as well. So let's recap real quick. So affordability wise, some things you may want to consider in a high interest rate environment is to incorporate down payment assistance, and or take advantage of loan programs such as USDA, VA if applicable, and then 0% down payment conventional loan was recently introduced. You can pool your resources, and one of the easiest way to do that is to buy a home with a family member, be that a sister, brother, or your parents. You may also want to consider moving further away from the city. So either move to the suburbs or beyond the suburbs, and move to the country. But yeah, but those are a few things that you can incorporate, because at the end of the day, we all need somewhere to live. Housing is a commodity, so if home ownership is something that you aspire to do, those are some ways that you can make home ownership more affordable in this current environment. And to recap, housing inventory is up about 5% month over month. Buyer demand continues to outpace housing supply. Rates are decreasing slower than expected and recently increased in response to overall inflation. Home prices for single-family detached homes in Metro Atlanta have increased each month so far for the year. The average sales price for detached homes is $565,719, with the average days on market at 28, and the month supply of inventory is 2.8. For attached homes, the average sales price is $412,195, and the days on market is 38. Month supply of inventory is 3.2. Another thing we discussed is home ownership affordability. Those options include interest buy down rate, incorporating some sort of down payment assistance program, taking advantage of 0% down loan or 0% down payment loans, pooling your resources. One I forgot to mention is house hacking. So if you can afford to purchase a home without pooling your resources, you can purchase a home and then either rent out rooms or rent out the basement space. So becoming a homeowner and landlord all in one go. You may also want to consider moving outside of the city center. Location plays a big role in price. As always, it's my goal to provide you with accurate information from trusted sources so that you can make the best decisions for yourself and your family. See you on the next video, guys. Bye.